The clinging cats dropped off and tumbled into the swarm. And the swarm exploded in a snarling panic. He had his revolver in his hand now, but he didn't use it, and he didn't run. He seemed bewildered. He took an uncertain step. He bumped into the car and stood swaying. I yelled and beckoned. I shouted to him to come on to the house. He turned again with his revolver waving. He gave a kind of whimpering sob. I reloaded and fired again in the air. The cats yowled, but only some of them panicked. He half turned back. He seemed to be listening and started down the driveway. I yelled at the top of my voice. He heard me. He stopped and faced around. He wiped a bloody hand across his bloody face. He took a step towards the house and stopped again. His feet were tangled in cats. He wiped his hand across his face, across his eyes. There was a streak of mangy yellow, and a cat was on his arm. It flowed to his shoulder. He struck at it with his revolver. He struck and missed, and the revolver flew out of his hand. The cat lunged for his face. He grabbed and got it in his hands, got it around the neck. He tore it squirming, writhing, hissing loose. It clawed at his hands, at his neck, at his face. He twisted it away and threw it into the pack at his feet, but it took his balance with it. He pitched to his knees. I had one last glimpse of his face. What was left of his face. Then the cats were on him. They were all over him. He was down on his back and screaming under the surge of a dozen cats. I fired again. I fired this time at the cats. There was a yelp. There was a yelp or two, and a louder yowl. But that was all. They didn't even scare. Yes, my friends, Feral by Berton Roueche. A novel of screaming terror. Now, I've talked about this before in one of my videos, how I was preparing for my Richard Matheson video to talk about The Shrinking Man. And I was taking a look at this. Stephen King's Danse Macabre, which is a great book about horror. And he was talking about Richard Matheson's The Shrinking Man, which is a fantastic book. And yeah. I ran across this. The Shrinking Man can be read simply enough as a great adventure story. It is certainly one of the select handful that I have given to people, envying them the experience of the first reading. Others would include Bloch's, that would be Robert Bloch's, The Scarf, Tolkien's The Hobbit, and Berton Roueche's Feral. Now, of course, when I read that, I was like, Feral? Berton Roueche's Feral? What the heck is that? But I figured if Stephen King is comparing this book to The Hobbit and The Shrinking, I mean, it's got to be great. He's up there with Robert Bloch and Richard Matheson. And so, of course, I had to read this book because it's, you know, he envies me the first experience of reading it. So I went on the interweb and I ordered it. And now the cover was different than this fantastic cover with the terrifying kitty cat. There was a cat on the cover, but it was just like this fat cat kind of hanging out. And I figured, well, it's feral. It's probably, I don't know. I didn't think it was really about killer cats. I couldn't imagine that it would actually be a book about killer kitty cats. But sure enough, I received in the mail this, with that little fella looking all cute, about to attack a piece of string or something. And sure enough, it is a book about killer kitty cats. Okay, I said. But even then, even when I got it and I knew it was a book about killer kitty cats, I figured, it's got to still be good, right? I mean, subject matter aside, Stephen King wouldn't compare this guy's book to The Hobbit and The Shrinking Man or even Robert Bloch's The Scarf if it wasn't good, right? I mean, come on. And then look at these great blurbs. The Washington Post says, pure horror fiction at its nightmarish best. The San Francisco Examiner said, this one could scare the daylights out of you. Kirkus Reviews says, the most frightening takeover since the day of the Triffids. So, it's being compared to the day of the Triffids here. What else? We got even more inside the book here. New York Times has action-packed suspense. Minneapolis Tribune, the story builds to a screeching climax of horror. New York Times Book Review says, a feline Jaws. Roueche develops it with his impeccable timing and step-by-step respect for suspense. And perhaps most impressive of all is from the Los Angeles Times. A humdinger of a scare story. Hey man, Feral has reached humdinger status. It's gotta be great, right? So, yeah. So I read this book. Guys, shockingly enough, this book sucks. This book is terrible. I mean, it's terrible in every way. There's not even one slight, teensy little way where this book is not awful. Now, that little tidbit that I read, that action-packed, suspense-filled scene that I read you there, that is probably the high point of the prose in this book. I mean, literally nothing is good in this book. The characters are paper thin. The situations are ridiculous. The writing is just bizarre. I mean, he'll go into incredible detail about some things, like guy walks in the door and he'll describe everything this guy does as he walks 10 feet, And then he'll skip 3 months without telling you. And then all of a sudden it's and 3 months later. I mean, it's just so bad. It's just so bad. Now, I know I should have expected that when I found out that this is a book about kitty cats. Now, listen, there is nothing less scary than, bunny rabbits are less scary. But this kind of reminds me of that kind of thing. Remember back in the 70s, or if you weren't there, if you missed the 70s, good job. Not the best decade, the 70s. But if you missed the 70s, then you missed great films like Night of the Lepus. Now, Night of the Lepus was a film about giant bunny rabbits. And it did have the benefit of being hilarious. So it was an entire movie about giant hopping bunny rabbits, and they tried to make the bunny rabbits scary. At one point, they put fake blood on the bunny rabbits' mouths after they supposedly ate somebody. And they run across these terrible sets of houses. I mean, just get on the YouTube and type in Night of the Lepus, and you'll see some trailers and things, and it's hilarious. Nothing is less scary than that, but this is close. And this reminds me of a really bad 1970s creatures attacking, animals gone wild movie. It could not possibly be filmed because cats don't like working together and they don't like working with people. And so, if you tried to film these scenes, you'd have a bunch of pretend cats, and that's what I pictured. I pictured a really bad special effects scene in what I just read you, with like fake cats hanging off the sky and him flailing around with like really bad fake blood. I mean, this is like a novelization of a terrible movie that was so terrible it was never released. That's what this feels like to me. It's just so bad. Just so bad, Farrell. I mean, yeah, I mean, it has the benefit of being short, but I have to wonder, where did these reviews come from? And what was this guy thinking? What were you thinking, Stephen King? I gotta figure. I mean, and a lot of the other things he says in this book are pretty reliable, I have to say. I always felt had a pretty good taste when it came to horror. So this boggles my mind. Why? Why, Stephen King, would you say this? Why would you say that this is up there with The Shrinking Man? Why would you say this is up there with The Hobbit? Are you crazy? How stoned were you? He had to be stoned, right? When he read this book? I mean, actually, if you're going to enjoy this book, probably the only way to do it is to be stoned or drunk. I don't get drunk or stoned, so, I was at a disadvantage. It did sort of make me wish that I could get stoned or drunk to make it through this book. I mean, it's a tiny book, but it was hard to get through at some points. Other points, it's just plain hilarious. So there was that. But listen, kitty cats? Seriously? You're at a disadvantage already. I have 3 cats here at Stately Vaughan Manor, and the only thing that are terrified of this cats or could be terrified of these cats are mice and birds. If you're not a mouse or a bird, you're not going to be scared of kitty cats. You're just not. What were you thinking? I mean, they even had like an X-Files episode with killer cats, and it was completely embarrassing. It was embarrassing for like the actors. The cats looked embarrassed. You can't make cats scary. You just can't. The only time a cat has ever been scary ever is in Pet Sematary. Stephen King did pull it off because that one cat was pretty creepy. But that's literally the only time I've ever seen a scary cat or read about a scary cat. These cats in this book, by the end of this book, you want them to slaughter all the humans. You just kill them all. Kill them all, cats, please. End our suffering. End the reader's suffering and kill all the people. Yeah, this book is ridiculous. It's absurd. Yeah, this is the worst book I've read in probably 20 years. Yeah, this could be the worst. It's just bad in every way. Feral by Berton Roueche. It's bad in every way. Okay, friends, meet me back here tomorrow at Stately Vaughan Manor when hopefully we talk about books that are good. Okay, guys, have a great day.